Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 69 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every week to help you build a better marketing strategy. On this week's episode, we're looking at password security and everything that entails, because it's a bit of a minefield, frankly. There's a lot of places where people can fall foul and start losing data, especially in our world, client data, which you don't want to lose. So joining us, we've got Ash Gibbons. He's a software developer, and he's got a very deep interest in password security. Ash, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. So what got you interested in password security and all of that sort of stuff?
Quite a lot of things obviously use passwords. Essentially all of our personal data is protected sometimes by pretty flimsy passwords, and the website that you're logging onto has done like correct security practices. So I got quite interested in how to mitigate that and how we can stay safe in a predominantly digital world now.
Yeah, because everything is, pretty much everything is online. Our banking is online, and it's so easy. I listen to a great program, Moneybox, on BBC, and they are often talking about some of the scams that people play that are very complicated scams using lots of the everyday digital devices that we're using to basically fake a relative or someone within the family. I know Claire and I have talked about it many times, and how they can get very close to you and then use social engineering, where they effectively get close to you to maybe get a code out of you that a bank sends through on a mobile device or an email, and then are able to sort of gain different levels of access from that. And it's quite scary, really, how easily that can happen if you've got an intelligent hacker, or not even a hacker, just someone who really knows what they're doing and knows how to work around people's vulnerabilities. So where do we start? Because it's a big world, really, in terms of there's so many devices that we've got to protect against. If we're thinking about it from a business context, what's the best way to start sort of protecting ourselves online?
So the best start would be really, really strong passwords. There's been quite a lot of talk about how to generate a strong password, and then everyone says you have to use like uppercase characters, lowercase, special characters, numbers, and then what everyone does is just have a word with just a number and a letter.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
There's a funny Michael McIntyre sketch where he goes into the password, where everyone has passwords, and then as the internet evolved, everyone was told to use a capital letter. So all they did was just capitalize the first letter. Yes, yeah, that's it. And then they were told to put a number on, and then just put 1 on the end. And then when that runs out, they put 2 on the end. So instead of just using stuff like that, there's really good algorithms for generating passwords. The best thing you can actually do is just use 3 or 4 random long words.
Yeah.
There's a comic by an organization called XKCD about this.
Yeah, I've got that up here.
Got that up, yeah. So instead of using random words with loads of rubbish in it, you could just choose 4 long words or 3 or 4 long words, and not like cat, sat, mat or something, but the example there, correct horse, battery, staple. And then you just think about a clever little story about how to tie those words together, and then you'll just remember it.
So that's the benefit. It allows you to have a very long password, but one that you can remember because it's just words that, as you've got in here. Yes, the guy is remembering it because he's got a little in his mind. He's picturing a horse saying, "That's a battery staple." Correct. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the words are, but you're right. It's how you string them together that's important. So when a lot of password, when you come to a lot of online passwords, they require you often to have obviously uppercase, lowercase, numbers, characters, and a certain strength. Can you tell me a little bit more about what difference those make and why they insist on having sort of lengths or different characters?
Yeah, so for every character set in a password, if you've got, say, a 10 character password and you only have lowercase characters in it, that means for every one of those 10 spaces, there's 26 possible combinations. So essentially the key space, which is every single combination of password you can have, is 26 to the power of 10. So 26 times 26 times 2. Even if you just add uppercase, so every character can have lowercase and uppercase, then that changes it from 26 to obviously 52.
Yeah.
And then every number is then 62, and then special characters. So every time you're adding a character set to it, you're then increasing the key space exponentially.
Yeah, so adding the characters makes it increase, and then adding the length, adding a character onto the length will then increase it as well. So what would you say is most important? Is it more important to have a longer password, or more important to have a more complicated looking password like the trouble door one here?
So the longer the better, even with a limited character set. So yeah, you have longer passwords. If you can stick in a couple of characters within that, then that's always good. But then the common substitutions of like correct, everyone just changes an O to be a 0, or an E to be a 4, or something like that. So that you can have limited attacks against that. So instead of going through all of the characters, you have like O or 0 for words. So longer passwords are generally better.
Yeah, I guess there's people think, well, if I replace the O for a 0, that's good, but that's a known thing that people do now. So I think when people come to break these passwords, they often run through a list first of known passwords, which will come to something where they might get those passwords in a minute, but they run through a list of known passwords, don't they? And so, really, if you've got just a single word or 2 words together that people commonly use, then it's like not having a password anyway. So you may as well not bother.
Yeah, absolutely. So they use these word lists instead of having to crack all of the passwords. They just have the common ones, and unfortunately, stuff like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is still depressingly common. password 1, all those kind of things are still quite common out there. So they still do these word list attacks because, unfortunately, at this point, it still works.
So where do they get them from? I think you mentioned there's a service called, isn't it I've Been Pwned or I've Been Owned? I never know how to say this.
It's Have I Been Pwned?
Yes, Have I Been Pwned? That's right.
Been pwned, yes.
So tell us about this service. What's it do, and why is it useful to people?
So every time there's a known password breach, and you can see on the bottom right of the screen, they're constantly adding it. That top one, the Doom Worlds accounts, that was actually added this month. Every time there's been a breach, and that whether that's a company saying, yeah, we've been breached, or the actual result of that breach ends up on the internet or on the dark web, the organization behind Have I Been Pwned will get that information and then put it into a list. So you can actually see if you're a subject of any of the breaches.
Yeah, so let's do that now. What you do, you come to the website, they've got the little form to fill in. So we're just going to put in our sort of general work email. Click on that, and it tells us actually it has been found in breaches. So we can scroll down and you can see them here. So 123RF is a stock library. So we had an account, or we had an account with them at some point, but we haven't removed the account with them. So at some point, March 2020, they got breached, and so our email at the very least was taken. It does actually say what was taken here. So email, IP, physical addresses, name. So they'll have probably our old address, names, probably my name on there, and any details. It does say passwords are taken, but it was stored as MD5 hashes. What are MD5 hashes, and does that help protect against people knowing what passwords are?
So instead of organizations storing, say, correct horse battery staple as just text in a database, it will put it through a hashing algorithm, which will make it look essentially like garbage, if you're going to look at it. Hashes are generally one way. So to get the same hash, you have to know what the password is. Right. So the database will have all of the hash, have a hash of a password in. When you put correct horse battery staple into facebook.com or rather inventive.com or whatever, the website will hash it and then compare that hash against the database. So you have to know the password generally to get the hash.
Right. So that's their way of, rather than just storing the passwords in plain text, they protect them in some way. I have heard, though, that hashes can be not necessarily worked out. Well, not worked out, but if you have enough data, you can kind of figure out what those hashes are. Is that right? You can sort of reverse engineer them.
Yeah, so MD5 specifically is quite a weak hash to use. There's a lot better ones, SHA, SHA, and then like 256.512, which is the length of the hashes, is really good. The other thing that organizations can do as someone who's storing these data sets is salt the password. So you have correct horse battery staple in, and then you add loads of random stuff to it.
Ah, that's what it is, right? Because I know WordPress has salts that you can change as part of it, so you can just randomly generate salts. So this is additional data you're adding in to confuse.
Yeah. So if you got the dictionary and just worked through all of the passwords, you could just hash them at any time, and then if the passwords weren't salted, you can just, if you got that MD5 hash or that SHA hash which wasn't salted, you could just compare it at any point. So in theory, stuff like Facebook and Gravatar, let's say, if they were both salted, they would be salted differently, and therefore your password would be different in both databases.
Okay, so what they do is you put your password in, or your password is passed in when you type it in. They add additional data to it, which looks like random junk into that, and then they create a hash of that, which creates more random junk. So if you're looking at it, it's kind of been through the washing machine a couple of times, so to speak, and then it's just harder to reverse engineer that. Okay. So it says that there's another one here, Gravatar. So that is owned by Automatic, who own, well, they don't own WordPress, but they're sort of one of the top contributors to WordPress. And it kind of says, you know, you've got more information of the detail here. Gravatar isn't particularly sensitive, but they might have some data on you, names, addresses, and so on. And I guess with a lot of this, you might not consider this data a problem, but I guess that people can use this to build up profiles, which they can use to advance their attacks in different places.
Yeah, so if, for instance, Gravatar got your email address and your name and your usernames, and then in another leak, they just had usernames and physical addresses, then if you had both leaks, you could then start combining data together and building bigger data sets against people who have had something leaked.
Yeah, and I think that's where it becomes more of an issue. It's not just the individual leaks and the little bits of data, it's being able to pool all this stuff together. The one thing, actually, we did cheat. We had a quick look through this before, and we saw this one, Lead Hunter, at the bottom, March 2020. I don't know who Lead Hunter are, so I'm wondering if that data was stored or connected through someone else's system. So maybe they're managing an app on behalf of someone else, or you know, I actually really don't know where that data's come from. Maybe they are like an aggregator of data, so they buy and sell data from different companies, and they were breached. I really don't know. So it's amazing that how your data can travel around, and not sure who, you know. There's lots of people who have their hands on your data as it moves around. What would you, so just coming back here, I don't know if it's off topic or not. So I said that we don't really use 123RF as a stock library anymore. We use, I think it's Shutterstock if we need to, or we've got Envato, or there's lots of free libraries out there. Would we be better off making sure that we don't have accounts open if we don't need them? So if we've got an old account, we make sure that's closed down and our data is deleted, or we request it deleted.
Absolutely. So I quite regularly go through my emails and look for a search for stuff like welcome to your new account, or please change your password, or terms like that. And then that will hopefully remind me of all the accounts that I have. And then you can just go to those websites and go, I don't use this anymore. I don't use 123RF anymore, and try and delete it. So if the breach happened whilst you set up an account, then deleting it's not going to change anything. No. But if you deleted it in February 2020, in this case, and March 2020 there was a leak, then you should be protected as long as that organization actually deletes your data.
Actually did delete it, yeah.
Quite another problem in itself, but yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of these companies, through various backups and archives that they have, just to protect your data in operation, they might have delete you from the active system, but then forget that there's these sort of redundant systems which might have a copy or duplicate of the data for various purposes, or even developers might take sample set data to use for testing. So your data's been copied into other places, so it may not be fully deleted. So, but you know, at least you're trying to work through and try and remove as much as possible. Most of the good places actually do delete your data straight away. There are some sort of bigger apps I know that you say request delete, but they don't actually delete it for a while. They won't purge your data for a while. Maybe it could be 30 days, could be 90 days. But I know with some companies, they do just delete it immediately, because the moment you said you don't want it, they don't want any liability or any responsibility, even if that causes you to regret that decision later on. At least that, you know, they've acted on your wishes at the time. So just what's the best way of managing passwords? So it's all well and good to have a long password. So if we go back to this XKCD comic, and you've got a long password like this, which is, I can't remember if I got the idea from here to do this or somewhere else, but I certainly have, my password is based on this same idea. It's not that password, by the way, just making sure everyone knows. What is the best way to store it? Because obviously, do we want one of these passwords for every single one of the apps and services that we log into?
Yeah, absolutely not. So the first thing you need to do is not reuse passwords again, and that will help leaks. The single best thing a person can do is using password managers. So yeah, LastPass, as you already mentioned, you use that. I use Bitwarden. There's also 1Password. That's a really good one to use. So any of those are single-handedly the best thing a user can have, because to be honest, someone should only have to ever remember 1Password, and that's the password to get into their password manager, and then their password manager can generate passwords and fill out those password login forms, for that user.
Yeah, so we use LastPass, and I think it was recommended by you, actually. I think you recommended this when we were moving over from whatever we were using before. And the reason I like it is because they don't have a copy of the data. So they have a copy of the data, but it's encrypted. So if I were to forget, or I think Claire's in on it as well. So if Claire and I both forget our passwords and are unable to log in, they cannot decrypt that data. So it's very well protected. Too well, some people might say, you know, because this is maybe something we should talk about. But you know, you don't want to forget your passwords or forget your lose your entry, because a truly protected system is going to stop you gaining access to that completely. But it's one of the reasons I like LastPass is it's a very simple system. You can actually just have big secure notes. So they have notes where you can just put any text in you like. You can store documents in there like PDFs if that's relevant for you, or you can just have little separate passwords so it'll log you in automatically to these services. But they protect all of that under your password, under your account, so you won't be able to access that if you forget it. So it certainly keeps it protected, but you've got to make sure you remember your correct horse battery staple password. So passwords have been around for quite some time. Recently, it's probably been a number of years now, really, that people would have come across SMS codes or email codes that come through, or some people may know it as two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Can you tell us a little bit more about why people are starting to use these codes, and you know, a little bit more about multi-factor authentication, how it works, and why it's useful?
Of course. So two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is the overarching name for a whole bunch of different protocols. You've already mentioned SMS and call-based ones. So banks love these. So you log into Halifax or HSBC or NatWest. You'll not only have your username and password. When you sign up for the account, and you can change it, you generally put in a memorable word, and they will ask you for character 1, 3, and 5 of that password you put it in. So that in itself is two-factor authentication. But because that second value never really changes, they then added another step, which then turns two-factor authentication into multi-factor authentication into an SMS-based password. So you'll log in, it will send an SMS to your handset. There, with a code, you put that code into the web browser. The problem with that is there's been quite a few leaks and exploits against the SMS network. It's very old. It's been around at this point for about 30 years. And it's still essentially the same thing. So people have found loads of exploits into it. And it's a relatively easy thing to exploit if you've got the patience.
Yeah, there was a link I shared with you before. Let me see if I can bring it up now. It's called The Most Expensive Lesson of My Life, Details of a SIM port Hack. Let's bring that up. And it details through basically that process where someone was, they used the vulnerabilities or the known vulnerabilities of the SMS network to basically, well, first of all, they actually cloned his SIM. So they're able to get his number redirected to their handset. And then they just got, I can't remember the details of it. I'll make sure the link is in the notes. But they basically then got one of his services to do a password reset. So they went through that and they got a code sent to his mobile device, which was then redirected to theirs. And then once they got access to that, they got access to his email. And then once they got access to his email, then they could get access to his it was a Coinbase account. So his cryptocurrency accounts. And then once they had access to that, they were able to take money from him, about $100,000, which as Ash joked when I was telling him earlier, that might not be worth that now. It might have gone down in value quite considerably. But what I find interesting about this particular article is if I just skip through some of this, you've actually got a nice event timeline. And this is someone who is self-proclaimed, a person who really loves and understands technology, and they didn't realize this was happening, and definitely could have protected themselves better. And so that's why they wanted to share this with people, so that you could realize that anyone can be vulnerable to this. And actually, if you knew what might happen when this goes on, then you've got a better chance of knowing that it's happening at the time, and then you can help stop it. I think this is relevant. I'll take this off the screen now, but I've got another one, which I shared another story. I shared it last time, last week. And it was about my son, who's got an Instagram account. And he lost access to his Instagram account, or he needed to do a password reset, basically, because he couldn't gain access to it. He's saying, Daddy, it won't let me in for some reason. And I was like, okay, well, let's reset the password. Let's go through that. We went through the password reset process, and it came up saying, enter your two-factor or enter the code we've just sent to your device, your authenticated device. And we're like, have you set up two-factor? I didn't set this up with you. Have you set it up? No, I haven't set it up. And so what it looks like is, once I found that out, I was like, okay, something's gone wrong here. And I sort of dug into it a little bit more and say, has anyone been in contact with you and asked you for any information? He said, oh, there was this, I got this message through on Instagram. Some guy said he'd lost access to his account, and he contacted Instagram, and they said, look, if you can get these codes from these other users on Instagram, then we'll give you access. And Sam, being a very nice, naive boy, basically gave him this two-factor code that came through on his messages, because obviously the guy was then onto his Instagram account trying to gain access. It sent through the two-factor code to his phone. He gave them, it wasn't a code, it was a link, but it was the same difference. Gave them took a screenshot of the link, gave it to him. He had access. He went in and set up two-factor or set up multi-factor, so that Sam couldn't gain access. The great thing about that attack, the clever thing about the attack, is that the person running it did not change any of the details. So Sam wasn't alerted that there was any problem. And if he was alerted, there was a chance he could have revoked it back again. but he didn't have the opportunity to do that. And sadly, because Sam didn't post any pictures of himself on there, he couldn't even prove it was his account in the first place. So he had to let that go by the wayside. And actually what happened, we found out a couple of months later, we found out the account was starting to spam out rubbish and eventually got closed down. So that's what they wanted it for. They just wanted it to spam out data, but they wanted it like a real user account that had been active for some time. But it just goes to show, I mean, he was naive, he's young, you know, he's 13, so he just not long had this Instagram account, and he trusted this other person on the end of through Instagram, because of course, why wouldn't you? Because everyone's nice. But that was, I think, what I came out of that thinking is actually you could feel you've got a good password, but if someone can bypass you and get access to that SMS code, and then they enable two-factor, and you haven't done that already, you've got no chance of getting back in. It's not impossible to get back in, because they've then protected with the two-factor. And then once they've got that, they can then change all the other details as they wish. And it's a long story, but I think it's worth sharing that with people, because it's just so easy to happen. And you can't think, well, I'm an adult, that's never going to happen to me. It will happen. Have you got, you don't suppose you've got any stories like that, Ash, where, or anecdotes from other people, things that have happened, that have gone wrong?
No, not unfortunately, not really like that. No, mainly because I always try to do that.
Yeah.
Is it like never give out the codes to anyone? Banks are actually quite good at doing that. Whenever they send you an SMS, if it hasn't been intercepted and you've had an attack on you, it will say like never give this code to anyone. Or on the website, it will say we're going to send you a code, don't give it to anyone.
Yeah.
So that's always pretty good.
Yeah, but people do. I mean, I often have it in the work that I do, working with clients. They've got two-factor enabled. Google will often insist upon it. And then I have to request those codes. And many clients are very happy to give me those codes. I almost wish that actually what I try and do now is we'll have a conversation. So we'll be having a conversation so that they know it's me and they know who they're sending the code to, maybe a Zoom conversation so they can see me, rather than them just sending this code out to anyone else so they can gain access. So how do people set that up? Is it easy to set up multi-factor? Are there different ways of doing it?
So it's entirely dependent on the website. Something like Facebook or Instagram or some of the bigger applications will support it. I know for a fact that Facebook will. So there's quite a few apps that you can get for Android, iOS, even your desktop. Authy is a really, really good one. You can pair that to a website, and then you look at it, and every, I think it would be 30 or 60 seconds, it just prints out a 6-digit code. And then when you log in, you will put that 6-digit code, and every 30 seconds it's just constantly changing.
Yeah.
That's a time-based one-time password, or TOTP. It's really, really good fallback. So you don't need any network connectivity. So if your phone's offline, or if you're traveling abroad, let's say, and you don't want your phone connected to the local network, you will always have that code you can constantly get. So Authy is a really good one. Google have their own, unsurprisingly, called Google Authenticator, and Microsoft have their own as well, which is also called Microsoft Authenticator. The good thing with the Google, specifically with the Microsoft one, especially if you use Hotmail or Xbox or any of Microsoft's services, is they will do pop-ups, and Android phones will definitely do this as well. So you log into a Google account or a Microsoft account, and then your Android phone, let's say, will pop up saying, "Are you trying to log in?" And then we'll give you 3 options. And Microsoft will also do the same thing, where you try to log into Hotmail or whatever, it will put up these passwords. These different numbers, so you know that it is definitely the same person trying to log in.
Yes.
So what's happened, and what's been quite a few vectors of attack very recently, I unfortunately can't remember the name of the company, but it's quite a high-profile company. They were attacked. They had set up two-factor authentication as well, but they were attacked through something called two-factor authentication fatigue, where if your phone is constantly going, like, "Are you trying to sign in?" Yes. "Are you trying to sign in?" If it's constantly doing that and you're not trying to sign in, eventually you're just going to get annoyed and go, "Yes, fine, I'm trying to sign in," whatever it is trying to do that. And they actually targeted someone who was in quite an important meeting. So he had his phone on him, and his phone was constantly going ping, 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 and he kept on stopping it and stopping it and stopping it, and then eventually he went find yes and just put it away, and then they were actually able to enter the system and do the same kind of thing as your son's Instagram attack, of like reset credentials and get in that way. So that's one of the things to be aware of, and one of the ways that companies are defeating that is by doing the pop-ups with the 3 characters. And Microsoft actually this morning released a paper about how organizations who kind of roll their own MFA can help with that. So it will pop up with 3 options, but it also provides stuff like where they think this login request is coming from. Is it an app? Is it a website? If it's a website, is it like a Firefox browser? It's like, well, I only use Chrome, let's say, right? So that's not me. And sometimes with a location on it as well, if it is supported. So that's one of the main things to kind of do, is use time-based one-time passwords or multi-factor authentication. But when you hit it, you need to make sure you are actually trying to log into a service, and it's not a 2FA fatigue attack.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to make sure, that is a good point. You need to make sure that you're logging into the right service, but particularly on the web. It's very easy to get emails that say, oh, you need to just log in and do something. I know Claire and I were talking about delivery scams the other day, slightly different, but they're just saying, oh, you owe some money, just click on this, someone's trying to send you something and they haven't paid the postage fully, click on this link and go and pay it. And if you're not looking, the amount's small, couple of pounds, maybe less than £1, you click on the link and you don't realize that it's not quite the post office domain. Very easy to go to the wrong place. I have done it once before in my life, many years ago now. I clicked on a link, went through to what looked like Twitter, put in my password. No, it didn't work. Put in my password again. And that's great for them because you're now just reinforcing what your password is. Suddenly realized that, went in, changed the password, logged out of everything, because you just get this bad feeling going, something's wrong here. Luckily, I've learned my lesson since then. But it just shows that it's so easy to happen. If you're busy, particularly, you saying about that guy in a busy meeting, you're like, oh, yes, just need to get on. And you're like, no, you've got to stay calm.
Yeah. So kind of the final thing on multi-factor authentication, so we've covered the SMS calls, time-based, is U2F devices. So these are called universal two-factor devices. This specifically is a YubiKey. So
it looks like a little USB key.
Absolutely, yeah. So you log in to Facebook, definitely support these, and quite a few other websites do. You'll plug it in, that little Y in the middle, that will light up, and then you just tap it, and it's got a little cryptography device in it, and then that's doing the secure key exchange. So there's no notifications or anything on this. No one can kind of exploit that. The only danger is if you lose it, let's say, but there's no real markings on it. It's just a YubiKey 2. Plug it in, press the button when you're trying to log in, and that's it.
So I guess you might leave that logged into your device. If you've got a desktop, you can leave it logged in. When you're away, you can pull it out and just take it with you. And I guess if you lose it for some reason, then you can just nullify that key. You can say, well, that key's no good anymore.
If you can still get into the account, yes, which is why it's important to have multi-stages of these. So certainly with these, what a lot of websites kind of enforce is you have a second multi-factor authentication system. So a lot of them is the TOTPs, the time-based passwords. You have to set up a time-based password before you can use these.
Right.
Which again would reinforce if you've left this at work or at home or whatever, and you've still got your phone, you can still get into the system. But yeah, so I use these on quite a few websites. In fact, any website that supports it.
Yeah, and so a lot of them, just going along those lines, a lot of sites also give you like maybe 10 spare one-time passwords as well, or one-time keys that you can use.
Yeah, so they're generally called recovery phrases. So when you sign up to the time-based part or any of the MFA solutions, it will give you a list of 10 devices. What you then shouldn't do is just keep those locked in your encrypted vault as well. So keep the recovery phrase for your password manager separate from your password manager. Generally, if you can print them off, a lot of them provide that format in really nice format. So I think LastPass specifically, when it will show you a password, it will have like green as lowercase characters, red as uppercase characters,
Right,
numbers, and I think it's orange maybe.
Because it is a pain to actually have to read them out, particularly if they read them back in. Yeah.
Because you're looking at it, you go, is that a capital I or is that a lowercase L? Is that a 0 or an O or a capital O? So they have different colors for that, and then just keep that securely around your house somewhere. So if you
and I would think that's generally pretty secure, because most of the attacks that you'll get will be online. People may come around your house, but it's going to be a very targeted attack. If that's going to happen, it's probably not a lot you can do about it if people are that targeted at getting hold of data from you.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. You can do so much to kind of protect yourself. You could, like, the main thing to stay secure online is not be online. It's not realistic certainly in this day and age. No. The most secure Facebook page you can have is by not having one. So that you have to accept the level of risk for that, and I think that's probably a really, really acceptable level of using a password manager. Have your password manager's recovery phrases, get off of that in the real world, and then store everything in a password manager with two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Not everyone is going to have one of these lying around. Well, not even lying around, but is going to be carrying one of these. So it's the level of risk you're happy to take as a person.
It's risk and convenience as well, isn't it? Because a lot of this the more secure things become, the more inconvenient it becomes. It's just trying to balance that with what you're willing to lose if the worst happens.
The problem with security is it's trying to stop you getting into the things that you want to do. So any step on that is just a real pain. But in doing that, it's also then making sure nobody else can get into it. And a lot of people I've certainly heard in the past is like, yeah, I mean, but it's just my Facebook, it doesn't really matter, or it's just account X, it doesn't really matter. But then, as we've mentioned before, loads of little bits of data sets and loads of little bits of exploits can then lead up to my Coinbase account has been drained, or someone's got into my NatWest account and drained all the money. So it's all the little things that add up. And even with the scam, the delivery scam that you mentioned, it only has to be £2 or £3, because if it was £10,000, you're going to be like, no. But if 10,000 people say, oh, it's only £1, yes, so it's the same result.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think once they have found someone who's vulnerable, then they will try again. And it might be that they'll collect a few details when they take that £1 off you. And then you might get more attacks because they know it works. They think they can sort of narrow in. They're doing, really, really specific marketing effectively, and finding out what works and then doing it again, which is terrible. Sort of talking about convenience and security, there's something that I don't know how long it's been in the works, but like the future of passwords is not to have them ideally. So we don't even need to think about passwords, and that the protection is provided via, hardware devices or software devices using our phones or other devices we have on our person. I know Apple has something coming out called passkeys, but all of the big sort of technology players are involved in this, Google and Microsoft. Do you know anything about that, or what's your take on it, the sort of future of actually getting rid of passwords completely?
Yeah, so I certainly think in this day and age, they are kind of redundant. And as I mentioned earlier, like, you only really need to remember one password, and that's the password to your password manager, and then that will remember everything. I know I've not used my Google password in years at this point. Yeah. Every time I try and log into it, my phone will ping and say, are you trying to do this? Yes or no? And then that's it. It gives you the option if you want to fall back to your password. But yeah, Microsoft and Google are kind of getting rid of that, because at this point they are kind of redundant. And that's kind of one other thing you can do along with password managers, is use random usernames as well.
Yeah.
If you're constantly Ben, as an example, on every single website, or let's say Ben 001, let's say, on every single website.
007, come on.
Oh yeah, okay. If you're Ben 007 on every single website, then as mentioned earlier, the all little bit of leaks add into that one person. But if you're Ben 001 on one and Ben 002 on the other and Ben 003 and for fun Claire 004 on another, even though it is you, then all those different bits of data kind of linking together then just go away. So
yeah, and I guess you could almost use passwords for your username as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something Bitwarden supports. I'm not sure about LastPass, but when you generate a random password, it will say, do you want to generate a password or a username? And if it's a username, it will generally just do like a proper noun and a couple of numbers. If it's a password, and then gives you the option of just utter random stuff for X amount of or N amount of characters, or if it's the words as well. So if you have to remember a password, definitely do the correct horse battery staple type thing. But if it's just to get into, let's say, PayPal, then whatever character, like however long their password is, it can just be garbage. For that as well.
So what would be good to sort of finish on is thinking about like conducting a security audit. So if people need to feel, I need to do something, really, I need to go through and make sure I look at my services. Have you got like a few tips or steps that people can go through to conduct an audit so they know where they are, what needs improving?
Yes, the first thing is generally do it periodically, but go onto something like Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo and just search for your own name and see what comes up. And then you'll find like, oh my God, I've got my MySpace page from 2004 or whatever. I definitely need to delete that. That's always a good start, and you can see what's out there. As I mentioned earlier, looking at Google Mail or looking at your mail service and going through and looking at what accounts you've signed up to. And then as you go through these accounts, add them to your password manager. So then you have a list of every single every single account that you've got and where it is. I know a couple of websites you'd think it was like organizationname.com, but actually it's something completely different, .net, let's say. So you have a list of what you've got, where it is, and then as you go through, you can then make secure passwords and then start adding time-based stuff if you still need it.
Yeah, or delete the account, exactly,
delete the account. So that's kind of the main thing that people can do is go through, because let's face it, most mail storages these days is effectively unlimited. I've definitely got emails from like the creation of my Google account, which must have been 2008, let's say, maybe 2009 actually, because that was when the first Android phone came out.
Right.
So yeah, just go through your Google Mail, see what accounts you've got, get rid of them if you don't need them. If you do have them still, but you do need them, then put them into a password manager.
Yeah, that's good advice. And we mentioned some apps that we've been talking about. So we've got LastPass. What was the one you mentioned? The Bitwarden. Bitwarden. So there's right.
So that's got extensions for all web browsers, phones, desktops, all that kind of stuff, like LastPass does.
And there was 1Password as well.
1Password, yeah. In fact, 1Password I think is what's recommended by Have I Been Pwned? I think
right.
Their front page. So.
And they work across all the different profiles. Android, Windows, Apple?
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly Bitwarden, I believe LastPass does. You can just have it on your phone and then it will support autofill services. So for my Android phone, when I log into a site, it just pops up going, it will recognize that I've got a password, like unlock your vault, and then just auto fill it.
Yeah, straight in there. And I know that Apple has their own, they've got keychains. So they, which is useful for some things. We tend to split it up. We tend to have like my personal things will be in Apple Keychain, but all of the business stuff will be in LastPass. So I just like that separation between the two. And it helps, it just helps. Otherwise you get a very cluttered keychain with lots of stuff in there. What else have we got that's in here? Not getting locked out. So sorry, go on, Ash.
Sorry, for the time-based one-time passwords, something like Authy, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator.
I think LastPass have one as well. I think they've got their own sort of authenticator.
Yeah, I think Bitwarden has it built in as well. I think you can do it on that. I just use Microsoft Authenticator for the benefit of having the Microsoft pop-ups as well.
Yes. Now I have noticed that you can, if you're generating a password for, sorry, if you're connecting your authenticator account, often it's going to come up with a little QR code. Now I've found that you can scan that QR code with two different authenticators, and they'll both then be generating the same key. Would you say that's a problem? Is that, because that might be useful for people to, let's say, would you say it's a problem then to share that pairing key so that someone else could have that same authentication code on their account?
Absolutely. So that pairing key is generated by the backend, and that's essentially what the backend's website and your device are doing. It's just constantly, it takes that key, does some time-based math to it, and generates a 6-digit code. So you can get a limited amount of devices. If you can scan that QR code with that, which contains the secret key, then that people can generate that. That's why when you've generated it, you can never really edit it. You can only add new ones to it on a website. So it will show it once, and then you just never see it again. You can never even see the key that was.
You kind of have to sort of reset it and wipe out and start again. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess just like having this printed list of one-time passwords to get you in, making sure that ideally keeping access to that. Once you set up your authenticator account, you want to keep access to that, because obviously you can't recreate them. And I know LastPass will actually save the authentication data into LastPass. So as long as you've got access to LastPass, it will back up your Authy account. Effectively, it's not Authy, but it's like Authy, into LastPass, so it keeps it safe. But I know that if you store it separately, let's say you've got it on one phone and you lose access to that phone, it's destroyed and you can't get it back again, then all of your multi-factor codes are gone, and you kind of have to rely on these printouts that you've got or other things to get in, and that again is a pain. It's going to set you back a lot of time to reset up everything. So actually having a backup of your multi-factor is probably sensible as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why you kind of want your multi-factor and your and your password manager kind of separate. So if you lose access to your password manager, then you still have your time stuff. If you lose your multi-factor, then you still have access to your password manager and you get around it. Whereas if you have everything all in one place, as you say, it just takes one thing to be able to not get into it, and that's it. You're locked out of your entire digital life.
Is there, before we finish, is there a way of testing that? So sort of testing what happens if I've lost this. Do you think that's a good practice to go through and say, well, I want to get into my email, and I know it's going to I need my phone all the time. Would you just say, well, I'm going to try and get in without the phone and make sure I've got what it takes to get in? Do you think that's a good idea to set that up in advance? Because obviously you don't want to be scurrying around when you need to do that.
Yeah, so for testing for quote unquote disasters is always a good thing to do. So if you have backups, if you're taking backups and stuff, then generally it's a good idea to test it where the thing I'm relying on has stopped. How do I get back into it? So that's always a good practice, not only for passwords, but for anything, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think the key thing you want to get back into is your account system, so you can make sure at least you're still invoicing people, because if that stops, your business can stop. Ash, thank you very much. That's been great. It's good to sort of dive into those details a little bit. No, I appreciate your time going through that. Claire, what have we got on next week?
So next week, we're joined by Nigel Smith, who's going to share how he's built his YouTube following over the last few months and already has 2,500 subscribers.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous. He's done very well.
He has done very well.
We'll be talking to him to find out a little bit more how he got there. Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We're here every Friday from 10 a.m. We cover everything around marketing, strategy, social, SEO, video, more, and sometimes talk about passwords. If you've got something exciting to share, get in touch, support@ratherinventive.com. And don't forget, you can catch everything we've ever recorded over the last 4 years. I can't actually remember now. I think it's 4 years. That is all on ratherinventive.com/membership. Just go and sign in there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.